I felt so bad about it. Same day I went to the doctor, got on the scale, I was 296 pounds, and I texted my wife. I was like, this is rock bottom. I felt so trapped and desperate would probably be the right word, that I had to take massive action. I was working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, just grinding it out. Like the more you put in, the more you get out. So I was like, this makes sense in the real world. But from a mental health perspective and, balance perspective, one, that's not all life is about. And two, it's not sustainable. Our body dictates how we feel.
Sure.
If you're fighting that, there's only so much your brain can do.
Welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. I'm Patrick Custer, your host, and so freaking excited to be here with my guest, former NFL player for the St. Louis Rams, performance coach, entrepreneur, and national speaker, Todd Anderson.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Welcome to the show.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, as I mentioned in your brief bio introduction, you were a player in the NFL, which I'm sure that reputation is one of the things that people lead with when they talk to you, talk about you a lot. Because people love football in this country.
They do. Yeah. I mean, less and less, honestly, which is what has always been a goal of mine.
Yeah.
Is, I usually, I think from the time that I stopped playing, I wanted that to be kind of one of the last things that people recognized, which is, for better or for worse, but I think as an athlete, it's quite the transition to, day-to-day life. So I think it was kind of a chip on my shoulder, and it's cool that getting to a point where that's mentioned less. Not that it's bad or anything,
Sure.
But it's just like, you don't want to, I think as you get older, you don't want to be seen as something you did 15 years ago or something
right.
like that.
So what was that? Take it back there. So it was 2013 when you stopped playing.
Yep.
And what was that like? What was going on in life for you then?
Yeah, a lot was going on. So I just met my wife now, but not at the time. But and my body was really banged up. I had multiple knee surgeries, torn quad, hand surgery, shoulder, all this stuff going on. So in a sense, it was a little bit of a relief. I got released and it felt like I was just ready to be done. I was only there for a short time, but I think just physically and mentally, I felt at peace being done, but that doesn't necessarily mean I felt at peace with, who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do and what that transition into, regular life looked like. And so that was quite a journey. And at the same time, my wife, who's a two-time Olympian, she got sick at 2012 trials to go to her third Olympics.
Wow.
So we were in a very similar place. And so I think that it kind of forced me to, I don't know if I shoved it down. I don't know if I kind of, consolidated my emotions, but, I think it helped because I focused on helping her a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I think some of mine was delayed, which later would kind of rise to the surface.
Yeah. Had you spent, I'm interested to hear from somebody about the psyche of, because football doesn't last forever. Had you spent time before leaving the NFL kind of wondering or planning or thinking about what you were going to do, what was going to be your purpose post?
Yeah. I always loved human performance. I loved feeling as good as I possibly could. I loved working out. I loved helping other people, achieve whatever they were trying to achieve. So I thought I wanted to be a college strength conditioning coach. So I did have a vague plan, or I guess an avenue that I wanted to go into, and but not a real firm plan. And honestly, I think when you're playing a sport like that at a really high level, you almost, not that you can't, but it's very hard to think about life afterwards because it takes so much focus and attention, and you just have to pour your heart and soul into it. So in some sense, you don't even have the capacity to think about that because it's just all consuming. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is everything is so regimented and takes such a huge effort that you're kind of living day to day where, there really isn't too much of a big picture. To think 5 years down the road, in 2013, to think 5 years down the road, well, 5 years before that, I was in high school.
Right.
So it's it's hard to even
I wasn't playing football, and at that age, I wasn't thinking 5 years down the road, right?
Which is so that almost, you could have said 5 years down the road, you could have said 50 years, and it kind of felt the same. So I think I just, you follow the schedule, you're in it for the day to day, but then, when the lights turn off, all of a sudden you're, sitting in your apartment and you're in the real world and you're like, what do I do? So
when you hit that point after, like you said, getting out of yourself a little bit, helping your wife walk through what she was dealing with.
Yeah.
What did that look like to, I think you said earlier, like narrow your line of vision on what?
Well, so I initially went back to where I trained for Pro Day, and I did like an internship at this performance facility, and we helped NFL combine guys train for the combine and get ready for the NFL, which was cool. But then we moved to Miami because Katie was going to go back to school. And at one point, I literally was just going to like take a regular job. I was applying to Vitamin Shop. I couldn't get hired.
What?
Yeah, it was, well, I was doing online applications. I didn't really realize you probably need to walk in somewhere, but, it was tough. And, eventually I realized, okay, I really want to get into training. That's the one thing I'm passionate about is health and wellness. And so I started as a trainer at Equinox. And that really kind of was like a launching pad for me to really take, my education and expertise to the next level and dive in full force to the education side of things.
I'm a little curious too, from the psyche standpoint, had you started to deal with, because I think we all either choose to ignore it or start to deal with the fact that we've got mental health and we've got to take care of it and cultivate that, in our lives. I'm assuming that might've been, some people call that a loss, that period of time, but definitely something to grieve because it's a period that was so, exciting and successful that was ending, a chapter ending. Was that your first big thing that you had to deal with?
I would say so, but I didn't really, the mental health space back then was a lot less talked about. It was a lot less accessible. And so I guess like on paper now I would probably have been depressed maybe, or I probably would have maybe sought out some different options or tools. But back then, honestly, what I did was I just like poured myself into work. I put my head down. I was working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, just grinding it out. And it was just like a coping mechanism kind of. I just thought, okay, well, that this ended, so I just have to be successful in some sense. So I'm just going to put everything I have into that, because up until that point, like that is how you're successful in sport usually. Like the more you put in, the more you get out. So I was like, this makes sense in the real world. But from a mental health perspective and, a balance perspective, one, that's not all life is about. And two, it's not sustainable. And I kind of ran into that about 6 months into working as a trainer when I was like, 23 years old. And, I just wasn't happy. I couldn't see like the light at the end of this road. I didn't really know where I was going. And that's one of the worst feelings, when you don't have, like, honestly, the worst feeling is when you don't have purpose. Like that's a horrible, horrible feeling. But luckily, I was training people and I was helping people and I felt like there was a purpose there. So I think that kept me going. But if that wasn't there, if I would have gotten the job at Vitamin Shop or something like that, I think it probably would have been a much darker place.
Well, and it's, looking back, hindsight, obviously always 20/20, it's really cool to see how puzzle pieces work together to like put you on the path that you're obviously meant to be on. So I'm curious because you use this phrase a lot, even beyond describing that you were walk-on in college football. Over the years, how has that changed for you since you actually did walk on?
I mean, I don't think it's changed at all. I think that everything I do, I have this chip on my shoulder, kind of like well, a couple of things. I always feel like there's always a little bit of imposter syndrome where I've always felt like I have this great luck. Like I seem to get lucky a lot. And even at Michigan State, just having the opportunity to go there, I felt like I got lucky. And sometimes, my wife will have to give me affirmation that, when you continue to get lucky time after time, it's because you're doing things and putting yourself in these situations. But I don't know why it is. I always feel like I have a bit of a chip on the shoulder, for better or for worse, and I think it's a good thing, because I think it's good to have the mentality that the world and people don't owe you anything, but in the same sense to have some, compassion for yourself and understand that, there's a lot of great people around you trying to help. But I think that having the mentality of, oftentimes you feel like you don't belong, but that doesn't mean, or you you have the mentality that you don't belong right then or right now, mm-hmm. but that doesn't mean you don't belong ever. And sometimes when you carve a place at the table, when you spend time around people, eventually like you earn that place at the table. And that's kind of like what being a walk-on is all about. It's like earning your way as opposed to being given a spot on the team. So I think as life has progressed, any situation I walk into it like I'm trying to earn this, and I need to earn this. It's not going to be given to me. And I think that that's allowed me to, one, have a lot of gratitude for things that happen. Yeah. And two, I think that it pushes me to like work a lot harder because I don't feel like things are just going to fall into my lap.
This is a great principle in grounding, simplicity, gratitude, humility. I love it so much. And that you speak to that and let that continue to be something that ties you down.
Yeah. I mean, gratitude, that was like my word for 2023. And I think if there's one thing the world is lacking right now, it's gratitude. I think
1000%.
I mean, people don't understand, like there's just some amazing things that go on and opportunities, and people don't realize like how good we have it, especially in the US, especially. I think that just, you can literally do anything. You're one call, one step away, one message away from access to almost anybody. And, it's really easy to focus on the negatives, but having intentional gratitude can pretty much, I think gratitude can solve a lot of mental health issues for sure.
I think it's the key to finding peace and joy. And it's also the antithesis to what much of our country and society thrives on, which is instant gratification.
Yeah.
Which any time and area, as I see it, that we make choices based on instant gratification, we're going to go in the opposite direction.
100%. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
You get that quick hit, but eventually it's going to fall the exact same way.
Yeah. I'm excited in a second. I want to talk about those quick hits and all the curves and statistics, because you got a mind full, my friend. But so you founded this company called, Dream Recovery. Yep. And I love the name. So cool. And the tenets of it, though, there was something really great that I wanted to speak to. That your goal is to figure out what recovery tools and techniques make an actual scientific impact, document those findings, rigorously test them, and share them with the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's our mission, is really our mission in a more simplistic way is, how do we end the rise and grind culture? And what I mean by that is not that we're going to reduce the workload, and not that we're going to have people do less and pull back on what they're trying to do. If anything, they're going to try to achieve more. But when you're taking care of yourself from a physical, emotional perspective, the grind doesn't become a grind. Like when you're taking care of yourself, and we're really focused on sleep, but when you wake up and you have purpose and you're well rested and you're doing the right things to your body, it isn't a grind. You're excited to attack whatever obstacles in front of you, and it becomes a challenge. It doesn't become something that you're fearing or you're afraid of or you're holding back from or you're dreading. All of a sudden, it just becomes a challenge that you're excited to take on and see how you can conquer it.
Heck yeah, I love that. So let's take that a little bit deeper and talk about when you talk about the grind.
Yep.
What are some of the things, behavior patterns, things that we consume, activities that you've seen and identified as negative or not benefiting, the health of our life and the growth?
There's a lot of stuff, and I think that, I don't know if I would necessarily say one thing, but the word that I always refer to is intention. And so when you look at a lot of these things that affect our well-being, like exercise or alcohol or, different substances, relationships, having intention within these different buckets is the solution that can kind of work for everybody. All these things, they're not necessarily a bad thing, and there's a time and place for almost everything. But I think when people are careless and they don't understand what things are doing to their body is when they get in a bad place, and it can actually exaggerate some of the stuff that they're trying to work through. And oftentimes, when you're working against your body's physiology, like, you're never going to win that battle. It's hard enough. Life is hard, right? It's hard enough as a person to just be happy and, consistently feel the way you want to feel and cultivate relationships and be motivated and achieve goals. That's hard enough. When your body is fighting you, it's nearly impossible. And I think that people don't realize that, and they think they can like out tough it, or they can, read something or, listen to some motivational, speaker and overcome that. But our body dictates how we feel. Sure. If you're fighting that, there's only so much your brain can do.
So on that note, you talk about understanding so that you're not working against yourself. Yeah. What are some of those things that you've identified we can understand more about? I've heard you talk about caffeine, alcohol consumption. Yeah. One of the first times I found you, not through your manager, was actually on social media. You were talking about, and I was like, this guy's in recovery. No, he's just passionate about the science behind living a healthy life. And you were speaking to alcohol. And then also the sauna stuff. We talked about that a little bit before. But okay, so caffeine, alcohol, sleep. Let's cover a couple of those.
Yeah. So, sleep is the foundation of health and wellness. It is the only thing that really touches all buckets of health and wellness. And it's something that's either making you better or it's making you worse. It's either elevating your wellness, it's elevating how you feel, it's elevating your function, or it's like an anchor and it's dragging you down day after day. And I think sometimes people look at, these pillars of health and wellness and mental health, and they'll put like sleep, they'll put nutrition, they'll put activity, and all these different pillars, when really sleep is the foundation. Because if that's not there, like you cannot overcome poor sleep. Everything else is going to crumble. So I think that mindset shift alone really draws attention to which things are going to like detract you from living the optimal life. And, alcohol, especially, people don't realize how much of an impact it can have on your sleep. And I would argue that most of the negative impacts from alcohol are actually because your sleep is disrupted, not necessarily from the alcohol itself. Long term, yes, but in the short term, it's more about the effect on its sleep. And, specifically with alcohol, what's ironic is alcohol reduces the amount of REM sleep we get, which is the exact kind of sleep that helps our mood stability and our emotional health, like our mental health, right? That REM sleep is very important. And the reason people often turn to alcohol is emotional distress. And so it really creates this cycle that can go downhill very quickly, and it feeds each other. The one type of sleep that you need to restore your brain and stabilize your mood in order for you to have the perspective to work through those problems is essentially being eliminated by the alcohol, because it keeps you in these non-REM cycles of sleep.
So let's talk about people like me. I'm a person in recovery because I really need to be, so I don't touch alcohol. I haven't for years and years. But kind of the way I think, and I think a lot of people might think, well, he's talking about, if you drink so much, right? Like that's not necessarily me because I don't drink that often, So can you give an example of what, how much alcohol does it take to affect your sleep?
Yeah, the timing of alcohol is really important, but even if you have 2 drinks right before bed, that could eliminate your REM sleep by 30-40%. So it's not like it's not like you have to have 8 drinks to have it affect you. And it, the more you drink, obviously the less REM sleep you get. So usually, even one, especially for someone that's smaller, can have an impact. And all the way up to after the point of like 5 or 6, it's having a massive impact. They did a study with a college soccer team, and I think that, they had 2 drinks right before bed, and that reduced their REM sleep about 35%. They had 4 drinks before bed, and that reduced their REM sleep by about 60%. And then they had 6 drinks right before bed, and that almost eliminated all of their REM sleep. And that REM sleep, like I said, is crucial for your mental health. That really is when our brain is able to stabilize its mood and almost like a mental reset for each day.
Wow. So is that a big contributing factor to like what people experience as hangovers as well, because they're getting the lack of the REM sleep that you're talking about?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Anytime you sleep poorly, you don't feel great.
Right.
And there are a lot, alcohol is, pretty horrible for us. It causes 7 types of cancer, which is now 7 types of cancer. Yeah, it's proven to be attributing to 7 types of cancer, and it's just in general not great. But I would say, you know, with the hangover perspective, there's a lot of reasons why people are hungover, but they're not getting, their sleep cycles are really disrupted. The architecture of all the cycles are disrupted. You wake up far, far more often. Your temperature regulation is all thrown out of whack. And like I said, you're not getting the right proportions of that sleep. And so I think that when you talk about people feeling really bad, that's probably at least half of it. And especially as you get older. And it seems to impact people more and more as they get older. Obviously, anybody will tell you that with the hangover perspective.
So talking about this, I mean, it's easy for, I think that, again, for people who don't have an alcohol problem to hear and be like, well, okay, but I'm not gonna like, what are you saying? I need to eliminate alcohol? Like, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I think, like I said, intention is the word, right? So little changes make a huge difference. If you think about, for example, let's say you're gonna have 2 glasses of wine, right? That's the plan for the night. You get 2 glasses of wine. Like, let's say I'm splitting a bottle of wine with my wife. If we have those glasses of wine and we start to make dinner, and while we're preparing dinner, and then we just have water or whatever during dinner, that's going to have far less of an impact than if we have the glass of wine at dinner and then after dinner, because it's going to give us our body time to metabolize the alcohol. So it's about having intention, understand how it affects your body, and making some of these smart choices that otherwise you might not think of. You know, and the other thing too is, like I said, there's a big difference between 2 drinks, 4 drinks, 6 drinks. So I think sometimes when people go out, they don't really think about how it's affecting their health, how it's affecting their mental health, how it's going to affect their sleep. So yeah, I'll get another one, no problem. Instead of just thinking like, do I really need another one? Like, am I even going to feel it? Am I ever going to enjoy it? Are we leaving in 10 minutes? Like, is there a point? So I think just making it worth it, right? If you're having a great time, like you're celebrating, you're with people you care about, like there are times when it's fun and it's enjoyable, and I'll have a drink every once in a while, but don't just do it to do it. Like, think about what you're doing to your body and think about the situation and just ask yourself if it's worth it.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting though, because people who actually drink live longer statistically than people who don't.
What?
Yeah. Fun fact. But there's a lot that goes into that, you know, because of
people who drink in moderation.
Right. Well, just yes or no. People who don't drink or drink, you know, statistically. But the thing is that oftentimes someone who doesn't drink for whatever reason, well, also if you've ever drank. So people who never drank versus people who have drank.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So the other thing, but the most important longevity tool out there is relationships, right? So oftentimes, you know, people who are socially drinking and they're very active and they're going out and having a good time, a lot of those people have really great relationships. So it's about that balance between, you know, functioning society, which right now alcohol is a big part of society, right? And having good relationships and managing that. But yeah, it's interesting.
It is interesting.
But also, the cool thing is the mocktail movement is real. You know, I swear, like 2024, I've seen more stuff about, you know, like people not drinking, giving up alcohol, especially young people, like the 23, 24-year-olds. It's pretty cool. It's cool that it's actually amazing when you think about it. And I'll be anxious to see, like, in 20 years, like, is alcohol going to be like cigarettes? Because statistically, it's very similar, like from the health outcomes. Like, we look at cigarettes, like, why would anybody do that? Like, that's crazy. I guess the only difference is, you know, cigarettes affect other people, you know, like the smell and obviously the smell.
And I would say too, the other difference is that typically people who smoke all day, every day.
Right. Alcohol.
Hopefully you're not doing that if you're drinking. That would be alcoholic behavior if you're.
Yeah. But I think it could, you know, in 20 years, people could look back and be like, that's crazy. You like, we knew this was happening, or we knew how damaging it was to your body, and you chose to do that. Yeah. But we'll see.
It's very interesting. I just got back from not too long ago, an event out in LA where the bar was surprisingly, like, it was all mocktails, right? Like, there's so many people out there that are here. I'm so much a part of, like, the sober crowd. So I'm used to just being around sober people, but I'm out, you know, I was out there with, like, what quote unquote normies, right? You know, and I'm like, wait, y'all are all choosing not to drink? What? I mean, this is awesome.
It's also cool too. Like, I've been ordering mocktails lately, and it's cool because everyone's like, oh, I need to have a few drinks to socialize and loosen up. But when you don't do it and you're around people that you really enjoy, like you forget that you're not even drinking. Like, so I think a lot of times it's more of a, you have this mental, almost association with that. But when you actually do it, it's similar to caffeine. Like when you actually go without it, you're totally fine and you're having just as good a time. And then you feel a million times better the next day.
Yeah. So let's move on to caffeine. One of those things that I'm also like gripping the side of my chair because I don't want to hear the statistics I know you're about to talk about. But let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, caffeine's like, there's a lot of positive health benefits, especially coffee. There's a ton of antioxidants and it can be really useful. It's just, intention is the word of the day. It's like having intention with when you have it, understanding how long it stays in your system, right? It stays in your system. The half-life is 5 to 6 hours. So that means that in 5 to 6 hours, your body metabolizes half out of your system. So, the example I always use is, let's say someone has 3 cups of coffee in a day, 100 milligrams of caffeine. That's pretty standard for like a, small Starbucks coffee. So 3 cups, you wouldn't think that's not a big deal, and they have them at like 8, 11, and 1 p.m., right? So just spread out. Yeah. The problem is it's absorbed much faster than it's metabolized. So that person only had 300 milligrams of caffeine. Last cup of coffee was at 1 p.m., but at 11 p.m. they'll still have 87 milligrams of caffeine in their system.
Wait, let's talk that through. How's the math?
Right. So you're jumping up, you put 100 milligrams in at 8 a.m.
Yep.
Right. So then by 11 a.m., you're only metabolizing a little bit. So you put another 100 in. So you're at about 180 at that point. Your body's only metabolized about 20, 30 milligrams.
Yep.
Another 100 milligrams at 1 p.m. So now you're at about 230. You can see like it's not metabolizing that fast. You've only metabolized 70 milligrams of the 200 you already put in.
Okay.
So now you're topping off at about 220 milligrams at 2-ish. That's when it kind of peaks. And then if the half-life's 5 to 6 hours, you're only going to get it down to slightly under 100 milligrams by 11, right?
Wow.
Because 2 and then 6 hours later, you're looking at 8 p.m. for half of that. So yeah, it stays pretty high. 87 milligrams, or Red Bull has 80 milligrams. So
I'm doing the math of what I know I drink, and it's way more than what you just outlined.
So it's like drinking a Red Bull at 11 p.m.
Dang.
Now you can get used to caffeine, and people are able to fall asleep, having caffeine, but it doesn't.
I'm one of them.
It's not. It doesn't mean that it's not affecting your sleep, right? Necessarily. And the other thing is just it really does ramp up your anxiety levels. It's a stimulant, right? So people a lot of times think that it's binary, like there's sleep and there's being awake. But the more stress you have, and Whoop is doing some amazing stuff with this, but the more stress you have throughout the day when you're awake, the worse you're going to sleep. It's not like you can just turn it off, right? So managing that stress, and the more and more research that comes out is those stress levels throughout the day have a big, big impact on your sleep at night, right? So you got to think about, how can I gradually really, manage my stress throughout the day, taper it off through the night where I'm at a very restful, peaceful place when nighttime comes around, not in this very anxious, high alert state of nervous system, and then try to like snap your fingers and go to bed. It's just not going to work.
Because even if you're not having external stimuli, with enough caffeine still in your system, you can sense a minor version of fight or flight.
Definitely. Yeah.
Self-induced.
It's great at upregulating your nervous system and giving you energy.
Yeah.
But there's a consequence to that. And you want that, you want acute bursts of stress, right? Like something happens, you react. You don't want to constantly be at an elevated state of nervous system. That just takes a toll on your body.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about having that balance.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. All right, we've talked about how alcohol and caffeine both affect sleep, but I think one of the most helpful things that I could ask as well is healthy sleep hygiene. So, right, like that's part of it, but when we're looking at optimal sleep on its own, what are some of the statistics around when it's best to go to sleep? How long should we be calculating for sleep?
Yeah. So, I mean, the best place to start is there's two things that you really want to look at is the quantity and quality of your sleep, right? From a quantity perspective, most people 8 hours is where they want to be for an optimal amount of sleep. But the hard part with that is when you're looking at the amount of sleep you're trying to get, you usually want to add on an hour for time in bed, right? So the minimum amount of sleep for optimal function, like continuously, and this is debatable, it's probably low, is 7 hours for an adult. Okay. So that's the absolute minimum. But they've done studies on cognitive function, and even at 7 hours, if you have 7 hours every single day, people's function and decision-making reaction time seems to drop continuously. So it's probably a little higher than that. So 7 hours is the minimum. 8 is probably around optimal for most people, maybe a little more. But you really got to shoot for an hour more in bed because it's not like you fall asleep instantly. Right. You're getting up in the middle of the night, maybe to go to the bathroom. There's a lot of things that happen.
Yeah.
So starting there, and then the by far the most powerful tool is consistency in your bedtime and wake time 7 days a week.
Why?
Because basically every 5 minutes outside that 30-minute window, so let's say your wake time or bedtime varies beyond 30 minutes, you can calculate how that's going to impact the body and the nervous system and basically put your body at this low level of stress the entire day. You know, you can look at your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability, which basically is a measure to see how relaxed we are and how ready we are to take on, stresses and workload. And you can look at these measurements and see like they're impacted. The further and further you get away from that normal time, the more and more your body is under the stress. Okay.
So consistency is key.
And I think that like people think, I'm very consistent 5 days a week. But the weekend, you also...
That even matters if it's one or two that's not on...
You're a real person on the weekend too. It matters. So, when people start getting closer and closer to the consistent times on the weekend, they feel so much better. Wow. Because your body takes a few days. You're essentially giving yourself social jet lag by shifting those bedtimes and wake times on the weekend because our body's circadian rhythm is very regular. So like when you wake up super late or stay up late, that's the same thing that happens in jet lag when you shift time zones. It's just you're doing it by sleeping in as opposed to getting on an airplane and going to a different time zone.
Whoa.
Yeah, so like Monday and Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday, it's very similar to, flying back from the East Coast to the West Coast and trying to get back on schedule or whatever it may be. It's hard on your body.
All because on Friday and Saturday, I was like, I deserve to stay
exactly.
up and whatever. Yeah.
There's so many people that do that. And then you're really probably not feeling great until Wednesday. Yeah. From the rhythm between, you have like these two, you have like your sleepiness, like your sleep pressure or your sleep drive, and then your circadian rhythm. And you want your sleepiness to align with your normal, times that your body is meant to go to bed or wake up and go to bed. Like when your melatonin gets produced, all that. You want them to align. Well, when you sleep in late or stay up too late, it shifts these and they don't align. And all of a sudden, you're not feeling great. You can't fall asleep. You don't wake up at the time you want to. And you're kind of fighting yourself till probably Wednesday.
God.
Yeah.
That's a vicious cycle that does not sound fun, that I think a lot of us are fighting and don't even know it.
Yeah.
So, all right, you've just talked about how consistency is key. Is there an optimal time for going to bed and waking up that's been identified?
It really depends. I'll say there is some good data showing that hours before midnight seem to have more benefit, which is interesting, especially on nutritional choices. There's been some new studies that come out that show that going to bed or having hours of sleep before midnight really helps with like your cravings of salty foods and high fat diets, which is interesting. But for the most part, it's what works for you, right? Mm-hmm. That consistency is the most important piece. So, not trying to fit, a square peg in a round hole is the approach you want to take. And whatever you think is from a compliance perspective, what do you think has the best chance of being achieved day in and day out? So some people aren't great at waking up in the morning. There are people that are more prone to staying up later. So if to get those 8 hours, you have to do a 1 a.m. to 9 a.m., whatever you think is most consistent usually works best. But the way to do that is be very conscious of light, right? So if you're going to be someone that goes to bed earlier, making sure you're manipulating the lights in your place and having this gradual taper from your living space to your bedroom throughout the night, similar to the sun. Like you want it to mimic that, okay, the sun's going down, and that's what, melatonin is really triggered by the reduction in light. So if you don't have that at any point, your body isn't going to start that rhythm to go to bed.
So that has a little something to do with the whole, like, looking at the bright box that we shove in front of our face.
Yeah. So
20 hours a day.
And so many people taking melatonin now, but I would say a lot of people taking melatonin don't realize it's triggered by light. So if you were able just to reduce the amount of light in your living space before you go to bed, maybe for 3 or 4 hours, your body would start kicking out melatonin, and you would probably fall asleep much, much easier. But instead, you probably have all the lights on, and people don't think about this continuum between different spaces in their house. And then you take a bunch of melatonin because that's never been triggered. You're not producing any, and they try to make up for it. But oftentimes too, people do that right before bed. It's too late. Like that should be produced far beyond your actual time you try to go to sleep.
Again, back to the instant gratification culture that we live in.
Yes.
Because so many people take melatonin and we think like, oh, I'm ready to go to sleep, I'm going to take melatonin now.
Yeah. And that's not really how it works.
Right.
It gradually ramps up throughout the evening, similar to, it should gradually ramp up with the sunset. That's how we kind of evolved. But now it's just, people pop it like crazy, and it's also something your body, most people have the ability to produce a normal amount if they do the right behavioral things. But it's wild. Like that's one of the first questions I always get asked about sleep is, what supplements can I take? Melatonin, all these different things, where all these, from the mental health side, stress management, oftentimes sleep issues have nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with you waking up and having extreme anxiety about what's going on in your life. Right? You don't have a sleep issue. That's a stress management issue, and that's actually working through that. So it's cool because oftentimes sleep disturbances will prompt somebody to seek help, go to therapy, talk to somebody about these problems, because if you're waking up continuously in the middle of the night thinking about the same things over and over again, that's probably something to explore, and you should probably talk to somebody about that and figure out some tools and mechanisms to help manage that.
Absolutely. So talking about all the things that we can do and continuing this progression, I feel like at this point we've talked about a lot that many people, a broad spectrum, are like, all right, yeah, okay, I hear some things that I can change, this or that. But the one that I'm about to ask you about, a lot of people are going to roll their eyes at, because if they're not already doing it, it's kind of one of those things that we're like, I'll do it later, or it's just not part of my lifestyle. But physical activity.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. I mean, it's hard though, I will say. I think that when people are in a low place, and if somebody necessarily, and I often associate this too with someone that's overweight. And at one point in my life, I was almost 300 pounds.
Of not muscle?
It was not good. It was not good. I was 296 pounds. This one day, this picture came out, it was posted on Facebook. I felt so bad about it. Same day, I went to the doctor, got on the scale, I was 296 pounds, and I texted my wife. I was like, this is rock bottom. Like if I saw 300, I don't know what I would have done. And I was in horrible shape, made a couple of bad business decisions, went to this place. We were around people that didn't reflect the values that we did. And it felt horrible, but it's so easy for people to say, well, if you just start working out, you'll feel better. But when you're in a low like that, either overweight or depressed, like the amount of effort or inertia it would take to overcome that obstacle is insane. And I always make the comparison of like an Amtrak train. If that train's not moving and you put a pencil in front of the wheel, it will stop the train. But once you get the train going, it'll blow through anything, right?
Ooh.
But that pencil, like when you're overweight or you're depressed and you're dealing with stuff, like to start physical activity, I mean, it feels like the world is in front of you. So it's a little, I don't know what the right word is, but I don't think until you've been there, you understand what a massive effort it takes to get that ball rolling. But if you can find a way to get that ball rolling, especially physical activity, the chance of your success from just feeling better from a mental health perspective, body composition, like all around, everything gets better. Everything, your sleep gets better, your relationships get better, you become a better version of yourself. But it would be inaccurate if I could sit here and tell you it's that easy, because it feels like you have to move the world.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's also not the most fun thing. Like if you're not like in a great physical condition and you're having to go somewhere, maybe you're not comfortable, and also just like working out in general is hard. Like it takes effort. So when you're not feeling the best, effort doesn't feel like it should. It feels pretty horrible. So it's hard to get that ball rolling.
Once the ball's rolling, like you said, you blow past the pencil, and it's becomes kind of a thing that we crave every day because we know the benefits of it and what have you. And more once it gets rolling, like it's easier to make the good decisions that feed on each other. But talking about, okay, whoever's tuning into this episode, it's hearing this, they're like, all right, my train stops. He's talking to me, what are some simple things that you recommend people can just try to implement to get that engine moving?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly love the first two goals I usually give people is sleep goals and then sauna.
Before even adding.
Yeah, because what you're trying to do is you're just trying to increase the odds that you stick to whatever you're trying to achieve, and especially with physical activity. So with sleep, it's really going to optimize your mental health, right? It's going to give you the highest levels of motivation. It's going to have you feeling as good as you possibly can, right? So that's already increasing your odds. And now you take something like sauna that's pretty enjoyable, right? The other two pillars that people usually focus on is nutrition and working out, right? And those are both difficult things. People tend to fail at those quite often. Sauna is something that's pretty enjoyable. It's easy to do. It can be social. But what the sauna is doing is that's also, it's increasing these neurotransmitters, your dopamine and these different chemicals in your brain to also boost your motivation. But there's been studies in the sauna showing, decreases in depression-like symptoms for up to 6 weeks from just one sauna use.
What?
It's a really cool study, double-blind placebo study, meaning they had the two groups. The one group, they warmed up their body enough to raise their core temperature like a sauna, and the other, they raised their core, or they warmed them up, but not enough to actually raise their core body temperature. So they thought they were getting the sauna treatment. Okay. Right? And there was reduction in depression-like symptoms for up to 6 weeks in the group that raised their core body temperature. So now, that's making your endorphin receptors and making your happy emotions feel better from the sauna. And now you build momentum. Like you take away that pencil and that train starts rolling. And that's extremely powerful. The worst thing I think people can do is, okay, I'm not feeling good about myself. I want to start getting in shape and adding in physical exercise. And so I'm going to wake up early before work. And I'm going to just, start this new diet. And they do these things that are actually reducing the odds of them falling through. Like when you're cutting into your sleep, now you're just reducing you're reducing the chances you're going to succeed. You're cutting into the majority of your REM sleep probably, which, like I said, is like a reset for our mental health. And all of a sudden, those things that were already hard become amplified. They're even harder to follow through with instead of actually trying to break down those barriers with sleep and sauna and make things easier. It's really a reverse way to think though, because with our society, you think anything worth having is going to be hard. Right. But it's like, there's no reason to make it harder than it can be. Let's make this as easy as possible. Let's be kind to ourselves and let's have a good experience.
What's just a great starting range? Because I always like to ask, so what's the goal? If we're going to add this new thing into our, day, what is the goal for time that you would want to reach?
I mean, anything is helpful, but most of the studies is around 20 minutes over 175, 180 degrees, which is relatively mild. So that's a great place to start. And the thing with the sauna is the more the better. So it's dose dependent. So the more you do it, the better all this stuff gets. If you do it one time, 2 times better than 1, 3 is better than 2, and so on and so forth. So really, if you can add it in 5 to 7 times, just try to make it part of your daily routine. And I understand that, saunas aren't cheap to have in your house. It's a luxury item, but there's a lot of, LA Fitness has saunas. A lot of Ys have saunas.
All the Ys here have
exactly.
saunas.
So it doesn't need to be this luxury experience. And I think just sitting in there for 20 minutes and you'll be shocked at how good you feel if you stay consistent with it.
Heck yeah.
But the minimum dose is 175 degrees, 20 minutes, 4 times a week for the best outcome.
So I want to make sure nobody heard you incorrectly. When he said the more the better, you meant more times, not necessarily stay in the sauna as long as you can take it. It doesn't matter.
After like 20, 25 minutes, it's kind of like, you might feel good and people might enjoy it if you're going back between like cold and hot. But as far as like the data and the positive health outcomes, it's kind of like, after that 20-minute mark, you're fine. And really, you want the minimum effective dose, because anytime you get used to something, it doesn't tend to work quite as well. So, and something to point out too with the sauna, you're better off doing it. Let's say you're going to do it 3 times in a week. You're better off spacing those out than actually like doing like 3 days in a row and then off 4 days. Okay. You want it to be consistent, because there's these heat shock proteins that are produced, and they stay in your system for like 48 hours. So, if you keep those levels high, those have tons of positive health benefits.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about with the sauna, and I feel like I remember you talking about the heat shock proteins being associated with this. Maybe I got it wrong, but that there are health benefits linked to potentially curbing dementia or Alzheimer's.
Yeah. So that protocol I was talking about, the 4 times a week at 175 for 20 minutes, that's been shown to have a 25% reduction in Alzheimer's and dementia. Wow. Because those heat shock proteins don't allow, so with those neurodegenerative diseases, these proteins, like these beta amyloid proteins, they basically just clump up in our brain and they don't allow our brain to communicate effectively. So those heat shock proteins from the sauna, they don't allow those plaques to be formed. They don't allow them to kind of clump together. So when you have those consistent high levels of proteins in your bloodstream, basically it's a neuroprotective mechanism that doesn't allow these different plaques to kind of build up and grab onto each other over time and cause communication issues in the brain.
Is there any study to suggest that it helps to break them up once they've
I don't know if they've done that specifically with sauna, but there's some really great, very optimistic stuff coming out with Alzheimer's and just the almost like the reversal of symptoms with environmental integrations or changes. And a lot of the stuff with these neurodegenerative diseases, like the environmental factors, like our lifestyle, it's seeming that it plays a much bigger role. I think 10, 20 years ago, people were like, oh, this is a genetic based disease, and there are definitely some genes that you can test for that you have a higher chance. But it's cool how we're realizing that there's a lot of interventions if you start these things earlier in your life. Like sleep is a huge correlation, but a lot of these things can really help long term, and it's really exciting for people that maybe ran in their family just to have this knowledge and understand there's things you can do. It's not, it used to be like, okay, just wait and see what happens. But now it's like, okay, I can be proactive and take care of myself.
That's great.
Yeah. Because I'm sure most people have been affected one way or the other from, neurodegenerative disease. It's one of the most horrible things to watch happen to somebody. And, and that's probably my biggest fear, is having to experience that. And just, it's just sad to watch. It's sad to watch when you see somebody that you care about not really be themselves, kind of lose that. And then sometimes it lingers on, and, sometimes you kind of forget what that person used to be like. And it's just really hard.
Do you have that in your family?
Yeah, I have had a couple people. I haven't had any really severe cases, where they don't remember, very close family members, but I've had close friends go through that, and it just takes a toll.
Absolutely.
And I can't imagine like if my parents or something like that, that'd be so difficult.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I love that. I love the piece about the sauna. It's something so simple. But before I move on past this like section of our talk, I want to say okay, we've added the sauna in, we've gotten our sleep in order. When it comes to activity, like what's the simplest, like, again, like what is just a starting point that you feel is a simple place that you suggest people pick up at?
Yeah, I mean, walking has a huge benefit, and if you can add on, a couple things, 3 things. If you can, the trifecta would be physical activity, social connection, and learning a new skill. Like those 3 things for your brain are extremely powerful, because when you have physical when you have physical activity, you're raising the neurotransmitters and some of the hormones that help you actually build relationships. And then when you're exercising, you also are elevating the chemicals that help your brain create new connections, throughout different areas of your brain and learn new things. So if you're learning a new skill, that also amplifies that. So they kind of all build on each other, and they can amplify all these great things happening in our brain. So I recommend people to find a group and try something new. Yeah. That's the best case scenario. And for many reasons beyond just health, but if you can find a group of friends, maybe take a new class, maybe it's like something that you've wanted to try. Like I took hip hop dancing one time. Nice. And it was, I've took it multiple times, and it was one.
Did you retain the skills?
There was no skills to be retained. Okay. It was, it was the most humbling experience. I also did in Chicago, where it was like, it's like Hubbard Street Dance School, which is like a pretty famous dance school.
Oh, so
like you went in there and it was like, this was like legit hip hop dancers. And I was just, it was brutal. I actually thought cause I'm pretty athletic. I'll be able to like learn this stuff. Choreography is so hard. But it's good for your brain to learn new stuff. Man, I was humbled. I think it's good for people to always be put in a situation where they're super embarrassed and have to just like take it, because that's what it was. But like seeking out those new things or trying something fun with a group of people, that's where I would start. But lowest of the lowest levels is just going for a walk. Walking can be great. Right. And you also, if you pick up the tempo and a walk a little bit, you'd be surprised. You can get your heart rate up and make it challenging.
Yeah.
And then even you do 2 minutes, 2 minutes really easy walk, 2 minutes where you pick up the pace a little bit and just add on. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It just has to be enough to elevate your heart rate a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is some great advice, for people to move forward and just make their lives better. I'm gonna move on and talk about actual your company, specifically what Dream Recovery is doing, what they offer to help aid in people living a healthier life. Yeah. So right now we're really focused on sleep products, and that's the majority of what we do. But what it's really about is giving people the permission to take care of themselves in the sleep space. And I think there has been this mentality of like rise and grind. If you're sleeping a lot, you're lazy. Like that's not something that a high achiever would do. And it's actually the opposite. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to achieve the biggest goals and function at the optimal level, you have to do everything in your power to allow your body to do that and optimize your brain and your function. So it's really, we're trying to create a brand that embodies that, and embodies everyone from, the super high level athlete that's trying to win a gold medal to like the mom that's just trying to start that momentum and move that pencil and get in the gym a little bit. But everyone's goal, whatever it may be, from that person's perspective is massive. Yeah. Getting to the gym one time might be a huge goal for somebody. Mm-hmm. And the feeling and like the motivation it takes to achieve that is the same as winning a gold medal for the person that's in that position. Ooh. So I think like recognizing that and giving people the power to do that. That was big what you just said right there. Like recognizing that motivation and what it takes is because of what your starting point is. It's all relative. Yeah. Literally like getting up if you could be the favorite to win a gold medal in Paris, and getting up to go to practice would be easier than the mom trying to get to the gym for the first time of the year. So I want to take a sidestep for just a second, because I want to come back to what Dream is doing. Yeah. But because you brought this up, so I think so many people could say that at one point in their life, like I had a most fit period of my life, but it wasn't right now. And so thinking about going back or like taking that initiative to get healthy again, I've been there before where I go back and my mind says that I need to go and start back at exactly what I was doing at my peak performance. That doesn't make any logical sense, but it works against us. And I like so many people I talk to, that's the same, it's where we go to. We feel like we should at least be close to that. We're going to try and shoot for it, and so breaking that thought process, because that's not realistic. It's not healthy either. when you hit almost 300 pounds and had this realization,
yeah,
I can't do what I'm doing right now. I got to change some things. What did you do from there?
Yeah, I mean, I took massive action. This was the time where the keto diet was very popular, and I literally didn't have over 50 carbs for 9 months straight. And I'm not saying that's the best way to go about it.
A day?
Yeah, a day.
Okay.
But I felt so trapped and desperate would probably be the right word, that I had to take massive action. And I guess from a mindset perspective, I tend to be very like all in or all out. And I think there's times where you can leverage that. And that was a time where I had this, buildup of emotion, and I just needed to apply it to something. So, harnessing it in that way was the most positive outlet I had. And I just really stuck to it. And like that picture like burned into my retinas. I swear, like I just imagined that every single time. I didn't even have the craving to want to eat bad food, because like the feeling of feeling that bad outweighed any of that stuff. It wasn't even like a thought. It wasn't even a fight. And I think that sometimes you get to those places in your life, like sometimes it takes powerful emotion one way or the other to get the ball rolling. But man, like that was not a good feeling. That was a low for sure. And I would have done anything to not feel that way.
Was that around the time that we talked about you experienced a low and sought help?
Yeah. So I had this weird, it was like an anxiety panic attack at work one day. Nobody really knew about it. I don't talk about it too much, but I left work, and I don't really know why. It could have been built up stress or whatever it may be. But I talked to a therapist, and it was an awesome experience, because it's awesome too, because now I can speak on it to people that don't understand it. And this was at a time, I would say, where right before it was mainstream. It was definitely, I was an outlier, especially as a male to be going to therapy at that time in Chicago. And I think people think about you sitting there on a couch and talking about your emotions and kind of like spilling what's going on in your life. But I always really think about it as almost like alignment and perspective. It aligns your thoughts. It gives you time with yourself to think about really what's important, what you're trying to do, your goals, how these different emotions are affecting your life. And then, it gives a sounding board to give perspective to what your plan is going to be. And I don't think it has to be, it is what you make of it, but it's more of like coaching and, bumpers and direction than this overly emotional thing. And I think it's so powerful. It's so helpful. I think anybody can benefit from it. And I think that the word like therapy, there's a stigma there.
Yep.
And it's not I don't even think it's the right word. It doesn't embody what you take away from it. I think therapy means something is broken, right? You feel that you're fixing something. And I don't think that's what's happening. It really is like elevating you.
Yeah.
Even if nobody's perfect, and you can always get better. And even if you feel like things are going well, it's always great to have that perspective and have alignment and have the time to work through your thoughts, because life's busy and life is crazy. And oftentimes we don't take a second to actually think about that stuff, or, we don't take enough time for ourselves to even piece all these things together. So having that time is important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that part. Because we love talking about it here on the show.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, it's important. Yeah. It's good for athletes too, because it's really cool the movement in the sports world of just, allowing that. And a lot of teams now are providing those resources really readily available. It didn't used to be like that. But I will say the one thing with all that is some of our younger athletes we work with, it's very talked about now, right? And words like anxiety get thrown around, and there's also, on the flip side, like there's a place for, working through stuff on your own. And when kids are like nervous, sometimes I think they think that's a bad feeling. And that's one of the best feelings in the world.
Absolutely.
Like having pressure and caring about something enough to be nervous and be terrified and be, have anxiety. Like anxiety is a great thing in short bursts.
It's one of the great motivators to push us.
Just constantly that's an issue. Chronic is bad. But I think that, defining some of that stuff, especially for our youth as they come up, is really important because it's one of the greatest gifts. Pressure is great for you. And it's awesome when you're doing something that you care that much about. So,
that's right.
Reframing that is important because right now, that the pendulum is swinging. And I think it needs to settle a little bit in the middle with education and understanding some of these emotions. And, but I think we're on the right path for sure.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Okay. So back to Dream. What I want to ask you, because I personally, one of the big things you're doing right now, you got the mouth taping.
Yeah.
All right. So terrifies me.
Yeah.
Because what if my nose gets clogged in the middle of the night and I don't wake up?
Well, my response to that would be like, if I plugged your nose when you were sleeping, you would definitely wake up. You know what I mean? Like imagine that happening. Like you're not going to just like, your body is going to, as soon as you can't breathe, your body would wake up.
Yeah.
But one, that doesn't really happen. Two, you can actually breathe through our tape slightly.
Oh.
So that's pretty normal. And then three, we actually are coming out with this month, these like small little strips for somebody that's apprehensive.
Oh,
so you could easily, like if you really like open your mouth, that would pop open, no problem.
Nice.
But that's all you really need to do. It's a reminder to keep your mouth closed. So some people are aggressive mouth breathers when they actually need the security to close it. And some people, it's more habitual or they just slightly have their mouth open, they're breathing out of their mouth. But, it really does tie back to the mental health perspective. Our breath is a direct link to our nervous system. So optimizing the state of our nervous system through nasal breathing is what we're trying to do. And there's other health benefits of nasal breathing, but that's the biggest thing is how do we put our mind and our body in the most restful position for sleep? And that's breathing through our nose. So the tape is there just to ensure that that's happening.
That's awesome.
But it's weird. People are like freaked out about it for sure.
I know, but everybody I've talked to that's done it has been like, Patrick, you're crazy. You're going to be doing it. You're going to,
ours is great for like with ours was
I was going to ask you because I've got a beard. Does it work?
It'll work with yours. Yeah.
Okay.
Ours is very sticky. Like, compared to most of them out there. There's a million of them coming out now, which is wild, but, it was made for that. And it's a little bigger intentionally because we have a lot of like guys with beards.
Todd just inferred that I have a big mouth. No.
Well, we can get some custom made ones if you want.
Nice. Love it. Awesome. Okay. So I'm intrigued to try it. I've been scared to, but I'm going to do it. And I will report back on what my experience was.
I'm curious your experience. Well, I'll get you some of the little ones too. You can start off small.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
And then work your way up to the big ones.
I'm excited to try. What is there anything else about Dream that we want to talk about today?
The tools that the biggest thing is like our mission is honestly to help people feel as good as they can.
Yeah.
And that's why I become so passionate about sleep is because I used to be in more of the strength and conditioning world. And when you impact someone's sleep, it makes everything in their life better. So that's what we're trying to do. And the tools that we have are just stuff that's been proven by science to work. And a lot of times when I talk about our products, I don't even talk about our brand specifically. I want you to try that stuff regardless of what brand you use. I think our goal is just to make the best, most premium version, but regardless, try the stuff, like, experiment, like I said, allow yourself to feel the best you can, because when you do, people don't even realize what they're capable of.
Love that. Elevator pitch. Why is nose breathing so much more important than mouth breathing?
We're meant to breathe through our nose and eat through our mouth. And as we evolve, our entire nasal system, nasal cavities are set up to allow our body to be as efficient as possible. When we're breathing through our nose, we're taking in the most oxygen with the least amount of effort. And that's how our body is supposed to be at a state of rest. So unless you're doing really vigorous exercise, it's much healthier and it's putting your body at a chronically lower level of stress than if you're breathing through your mouth.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then from a dentist perspective, you just have a lot less cavities if you breathe through your nose.
From a vanity standpoint, you keep the pearly whites.
No, people Dentists are all about it.
Yeah.
Because your mouth gets super acidic when you breathe out of your mouth, and then your teeth just break down.
And you have bad breath.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I had cavities. Like when I was a kid, I kept having cavities. I was terrified of the dentist. I still hate the dentist. If you're out there, I'm sorry, but I hate the dentist. And so I'd brush my teeth like all the time, and I kept getting cavities. And I'm like, what? I don't know what else I can do.
Yeah. And
it probably turns out that I was just breathing out of my mouth the entire time, and it was just accelerating that process. I had no chance.
Wow.
And then my mom, same thing, like crazy good hygiene, kept having cavities. Now she's all around the mouth tape and hasn't had any.
That's awesome.
We have our whole family. Me and my wife are quite the sight at night. We got mouth tape, we got sleep masks. Like,
love it.
Yeah. The number one benefit of mouth tape is, ends arguments instantly. If you're ever in a fight with your significant other, instantly mouth tape on, and talk about it tomorrow.
There you go.
A good night's sleep will calm down almost any emotion from a fight. Maybe not.
That's great. Well, yeah.
Depends what you're fighting about.
Oh man, Todd, so great talking to you today. I just want to ask, I always like to give the opportunity to our guests to share at the end. If anybody's like connected and been like, God, he really spoke to me today. Is there any word of encouragement you'd like to leave with our audience?
Oh man, piece of encouragement. I would say, no matter who it is out there, like the feeling of overcoming whatever they're trying to overcome, the feeling of getting to that place is far more powerful than that initial momentum, like starting that initial momentum. As big as that ball feels to start rolling, it'll be worth it. But I think people understanding that almost everyone out there is great as someone's life looks or successful, whatever it may be. Like at one point in their life, they were staring at an obstacle where it felt nearly impossible to move.
Yeah.
But you gotta start one day at a time. And it's hard, but we've been there, and if anyone is there, I'd be more than happy to try to help them out one way or the other.
Perfect. We're going to have all your website, the Instagram, all your socials and everything will be right underneath the main part of everywhere you're consuming this podcast. So please follow Todd and Dream Recovery, because he's got great content. Every time you post a video, I'm always learning something new. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you, man. That was great.
With that, I'll close out how I always do. Remind you that it's never too late to start loving yourself, and you're only ever one decision away from a completely different life. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.